Well, I note your ruling, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Okay, don't want to be disturbing yourself or anything.
Not disturbing me at all.
Okay, thanks very much, Chairman, and I'm only a guest at this committee, and thanks for the witnesses for being here and the opportunity to make a few points and put a few questions. Just at the outset, because there's some history here, I just want to say that I have the height of respect for Secretary General Watt. We have a history of spats at public accounts and indeed other committees. But what I would like to say is if I were in the private sector and was large enough of a company to afford Mr. Watt, I would certainly want him on my board. However, we're not in the private sector. And I think that's where a lot of the difference is here. I'm a democracy purist. And once at the Public Accounts Committee, when I raised wastage of 10 million because of an error by the OPW on the rent of the Department of Health, which will cost 10 million over the source of the lease, you told me in my question, was there a disciplinary process afoot? You were then in deeper, you said that you didn't know, but that we don't operate a gotcha culture in the civil service, was your quote. That we use these things as learning experience. And I thought, well, that was a very expensive learning experience. And while it was an auctioneering one, if it was Joan Lang LaSalle, you'd probably not have got as far as lunchtime. And before I get into my questioning, let me just say, because something is the practice, does not make it correct, does not make it morally correct in the interests of the taxpayers' money. And I, for one, with 20 years between Senate and Dáil and 6 years of public accounts and the banking inquiry, have watched senior civil servants waste billions in taxpayers' money, in circling the wagons and to create a facade to put across a prescribed narrative which betrays democracy. So can I ask, Secretary General, first of all, have you a 7-year contract as a Deputy Secretary General or as CMO?
You're asking me, sorry?
Yes.
No, I don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's the first difference between the precedent of the past. So unlike what Deputy Lahart said, that we were moving from Secretary Generals whose expertise we were going to lose after 7 years, that didn't apply to your instance. You were looking to move on. Indeed, if I quote the Minister of Morning Ireland, on the relevant day, and I hate to over-familiarise, Tony wanted a new challenge. And God knows, it's time somebody in the room said, Robert Watt was retro-engineering it. In direct conflict with the terms of the circular, which quite clearly say 6 months minimum, 5 years maximum, but she said it was open-ended. That's the first point. The next point, and this is to yourself, Secretary General Watt, this was agreed by the department, is a sentence you've used regularly in this room and elsewhere. By whom in the department? By whom in the department?
Do you want to answer it now, or?
Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Is it yourself?
So in terms of the details...
No details. By whom in the department? I understood that the minister is the boss, and in fact it was you used the terminology earlier. We have the employer-employee relationship. If you did, and you were my employee, and your plenipotentiary headed off and spent 2 million of the company's money without telling me, you'd be gone. But because we don't operate a gotcha culture, to include yourself, you'll be here into perpetuity. So was it yourself that agreed, or did you ever bring it up at a MAC meeting? Did you ever bring it up at a MAC meeting?
Thanks, Deputy. So first of all, there's no money spent.
No, we know that. Don't state the obvious to people who are well experienced.
Millions or billions.
No, it would have been 2 million a year into perpetuity.
When it comes to I supported the proposal, absolutely supported, as did the Secretary to the Government, supported.
Why do you call him the Secretary of the Government? I must interlude here. You're trying to create an impression here, and not that I'm letting the Government out the gap, because as far as I'm concerned, their autopilot approach to all of these matters is reprehensible. He's not the Secretary of the Government. In fact, his words outside this room, Mr. Fraser we're talking about here, is, it was mentioned to me in a corridor. So he mentioned it to you in the corridor. Where do you meet formally? Is it always in corridors? He's Secretary General of the department.
So,
So really, it's, what it's about here is you approved it, isn't that right? You approved it on your own.
I absolutely approved it, and I've made that absolutely clear.
Okay, so it was a plenipotentiary decision by you, such that you wanted to make arrangements for the office space, the salary. And funny, in your letter to Trinity, you don't say anything about Oireachtas approval or government approval. You said that we may need authority within the university.
Mark.
Sorry, thanks, Chairman, sorry.
You're asking questions. Will you allow the witness to respond?
I will.
And then we'll move in on the next question.
So under the 97 Act, as Public Service Management Act, and this builds on the 1924 Ministers and Secretaries Act, as you're aware, Deputy, Secretary Generals have responsibility for the administration of the department. And when it comes to the transfer of secondments or staff or personnel matters in the staff within the department, it's the responsibility of myself. That's very clear in terms of the legislation.
As far as you're concerned, this is your responsibility. If you decide that I came to you and I was, let me think, if I was the deputy CMO and I decided UCC have offered me a professorship and, I quite fancy going, will you pay for it? You're telling me you're in a position to unilaterally take that decision, make all the arrangements, and then bounce the government or the three-party leaders into agreeing it because you've leaked it to the media yourself? Because that seems to be the process followed in this instance.
Look, I've set out already for several hours this morning the process. That's not the process, and that's not a fair.
Well, that's the process to me, because I'm just going a little bit deeper. First of all, you have breached, are you prepared to admit that you breached the circular?
So the circular relates to...
Yeah, and we know what it relates to. On terms of being open-ended or time-limited.
No.
Are you prepared to admit that the terms agreed for Mr. Holohan's sojourn was going to be open-ended and a breach of the circular?
So there was no breach of the circular.
Well, sorry, okay, let's read the circular, Chairman. This proportion of it. This proportion of it is unequivocal, if you don't mind, Chairman.
With all due respect now, and I've answered questions for many hours on the matter.
Yeah.
The deputy wasn't here when I answered questions in relation to this matter. And
I decided to answer them, ask them again. Okay? Now, if I could read just the relevant section, because I think it's very important
Mark,
for the
if you're
taxpayer
asking
to know.
questions, will you allow the witness to respond?
I will. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. It's just that I'm very passionate about democracy. And I don't think we're getting much of it around this particular issue, I'm sad to say. Pardon me. No, I think it's important. All secondments will be temporary in nature, and in general be for a period of 6 months up to a maximum of 5 years. That's the very first key principle. So how can you reconcile that with open-ended? The CMO has very kindly pointed out he is a good distance off his 40 years. So what you were in effect proposing on top of the 2 million per year, should the CMO have opted to retire in the interim, say after 5 or 6 years, then under the special clause within the Superannuation Act, you'd bump up the 27 or 28 years to 40. Isn't that correct? And we also know there is no precedent for this because he didn't have a 7-year contract. We also know, as I've just read out from the circular, you were in clear breach of the circular. Can I ask, Deputy Cullinan earlier on was quite clear in questioning you to see, had the Minister expressed any displeasure to this? You said no. Eventually you said no. Can I ask, was the CMO's secondment part of Minister Donnelly's agenda?
No. As I said, issues in relation to personnel matters in the department are managed at Secretary General level under the Act and custom practice, so it wasn't part of anybody's policy. As we set out earlier, The CMO indicated that he wanted to move on, and we explored options in respect of that, and that's how we arrived at this.
When you were Secretary General of Deeper, would you have examined the business case for many secondments?
In my own department, I would have approved secondments when I was Secretary General of the
Oh, yeah,
department.
but I thought business cases always have to be put to Deeper, no?
No, not if departments have delegated sanction, and if they.
So there was no business case needed for this?
No, but the circular says where there are specialist skill replacements or existing arrangements in place with the organisation within a sector, the principles of the should apply, or clearance from Deeper may not always be necessary.
And what if NUIG or UCC decided, or UCD, who you said that discussed it? Well, we wouldn't mind a secondment of 2 million a year. Or some of the new universities without a particular health function that could be very useful to introduce a public health function where I know CMO's expertise is, such as the new Atlantic Technological University, for example. You see, what's coming across here, and I must disagree fundamentally with my colleague and friend, Deputy Lahart. I mean, this to me is corruption by any objective analysis, unbecoming both of ye and your expertise and professionalism in other ways. Because this was retro-engineering a position for somebody and seeking to bounce the government into it until there was pandemonium and all about it. And unless and until the 3 acts, the 54, the 1924 and the 97 acts are dealt with so that you people, quite frankly, accept that there's a democracy here and a parliament and an Oireachtas that is not and should never be blindly subservient to a position where, depending on who you are, different rules apply. In the Minister's own words, Dr. Holohan, I'm sorry to say it, Tony wanted a new challenge, and the taxpayer was prepared to dig deep, 2 million, and deliver it. Scandalous. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I just say, Cathaoirleach, I absolutely reject being referred to, myself and the CMO, being referred to as you.
It was time it was done.
Hold on.
You people.
Thank you.
Okay, Cathaoirleach.
Want to respond?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Again,
I think to be important, Chairman, from my point of view anyway, I'd like to be disassociated with any comments of corruption because I just don't agree. Yeah, I just think
we'll strike that from the record, yeah. Again, it was an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach.
It's unfortunate that, certainly the members expressing a view, not necessarily shared by all the members, but it's a view out there in relation to, I suppose presumably expressing his concerns in relation to how the appointment, or the proposed appointment was being made.
Cathaoirleach, can I say, look, that there are differences of opinions, and I respect that, and I respect the different views of members today, and I think the discussion has been, I think, very positive discussion and fair discussion, and I don't think Tony or I would have any issues about how we've been treated here by members. I think, we have to discharge our role here as persons who are accountable to committees, and we're always very happy to do that. So just to say that.
Okay, again, I'd like to thank the witnesses for the comprehensive discussion with the committee today.